I get a lot of feedback that's like, well, that's not comfortable. It doesn't mean it's like, okay, well, is comfort our number one goal in sales? I don't remember that being important when we did in-person meetings either. Like it's not comfortable to stand up in front of a audience and kind of contort yourself so they can see the screen and you can present and right? There's a lot of adaptations we make in person and we somehow think, well, that's natural and this new stuff is unnatural. Well,
Yeah.
it feels unnatural at first until it becomes muscle memory.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Julie Hansen. Julie is author of the book Look Me in the Eye and an expert in virtual executive presence. So, Julie, welcome.
Thank you, Fred. I'm happy to be here with you across the ocean.
Across the pond, yeah. And
Yes.
no, there's a load of stuff I want to ask you. But first up, let me just check that I understand what virtual executive presence is. I think I do, but I need your definition.
Yes. So that's a great question. And a lot of people are familiar with the executive presence, which it sounds like it's just for executives, but it really is the ability to communicate with confidence, credibility, um, empathy, being an active listener, all the qualities that certainly we look for in great salespeople, and being able to do that in a virtual environment because a lot of the people who are maybe well prepared and suited with executive presence in person, that doesn't automatically transfer to a virtual world. And so I help salespeople, leaders communicate with confidence, credibility, and clarity in a virtual world, whether it's presentations or demos or discovery conversations, so that they are seen as the credible, confident people they are, and not how the camera sort of distorts us and our audience sees us in a different way. We want to make sure our intentions match the perceptions of our audience.
No, brilliant. No, that's cool. Because yeah, we're going to have to mention the elephant in the room, aren't we? Which is that, a couple of years ago, many people who probably weren't working virtual had to work virtual. And it was a bit of a change for them and kind of a bit of confusion and stuff going on. So I bet your phone was ringing off the hook, wasn't it then?
Just a bit. Well, it's interesting 'cause the forward in my books is this is for all the salespeople who never aspired to a career on camera, right? That wasn't part of my career path. And I feel like we did salespeople real disservice because we said basically, get on Zoom, get a camera, and just go. Just do what you did and do it in front of the camera. And frankly, there's a lot more nuance to it. We've had a lifetime of honing our in-person skills, and we really have not focused much at all on what it takes to really connect and communicate through the camera as effectively as we do in person or nearly.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the time, people were probably quite forgiving. And lots of
Yes.
folk were kind of
Yes.
finding their way and were pressing weird buttons and stuff was happening and there were
Yeah,
all
but
sorts going on.
yes.
But, we were kind of in it together.
Mhm.
However, what I see, and I don't know if you see this now, is that some people are kind of still there. But I think the minimum standards of what we should be expecting has raised. I don't know, is that fair or is that me being super critical?
I think it's fair, absolutely, and you'd think it would be the minimum standards would raise, but it's interesting. I work with a lot of teams, and you're right. It's a lot of people started out. They took on some behaviors, adapted in whatever way. My friend said I should do this. My one manager said to do this when I'm a camera. People have never worked on camera before, giving advice to people who've never worked on camera before. And so I've got this hodgepodge of behaviors that are now sort of ingrained after what's it been, 3, 4 years? And a lot of what I do with teams is try to break some of those behaviors they've already established and build those more effective behaviors. But yeah, some people are still kind of at that minimum. It's enough. I'm on camera. What more do you want? It's kind of the sense I get.
I'm just thinking
Here I
some people
am.
aren't even on camera.
Right, right. Or they take any excuse. Well, my customer doesn't have their camera on, so I don't have to be on camera. It's like, hopefully many people have gotten the message that it doesn't matter whether they have their camera on or not. If you have your camera on, they get all the benefit of that. Yes, it's more uncomfortable for you, but is this about you being comfortable as a salesperson? No, it's about, making your customer feel as comfortable and connected as possible.
Who are we there for? I mean, that's kind of
Right.
that's a sales
Right. It's like, well,
mentality,
it's
isn't it?
not.
That's
Yeah,
not.
it's
It's
I
not.
I get a lot of feedback that's like, "Well, that's not comfortable." It doesn't mean it's like, "Okay, well, is comfort our number one goal in sales?" I don't remember that being important when we did in-person meetings either. Like, it's not comfortable to stand up in front of a audience and kinda contort yourself so they can see the screen and you can present and right? There's a lot of adaptations we make in person, and we somehow think, "Well, that's natural, and this new stuff is unnatural." Well,
Yeah,
it feels unnatural at first until it becomes muscle memory.
yeah, because quite a lot of sales is a bit counterintuitive anyway, isn't it? In the a lot of people think, oh, surely it's the gift of the gab. Surely you got to tell people stuff. Surely, no, you've got to learn to ask questions better. You've got to learn to sit and listen and let people think. And
Right,
what we're saying here is
absolutely.
it's another way of just doing stuff which might not necessarily be obvious, but it's better when you know.
Yes, yes. It
Yeah.
is better when you know and when you know how to do it.
So what do we need to know? What are some of the minimum standards? What habits might we need to break? Hey, I didn't realize we are going to
Yes.
break stuff on this. I like breaking.
Yes, absolutely. Break away. It's interesting when I first work with a team, and I'll work with, like, large companies, enterprise salespeople who've been virtual for a while, and I'll get with them, and they just make some basic mistakes that you'd think we're past now, and we're not. The major things I see are the lighting, right? If I can't see you, if you look like you're in the witness protection program, first of all, why are you on camera if I can't see your face? And it doesn't instill confidence. It's not easy to connect with you. So any of these barriers that we have that make it hard for people to connect with you, see you, know you, feel like you're a real person, we have to eliminate. So good lighting. I also see a lot of bad framing. Yes, it's like
I,
if you were in
yeah, as in
person,
food.
yeah, well, if you were in person, you would never sit like diagonally from them, would you? Right? Or you wouldn't show up just like a little floating head across from someone or be in their personal space. So, you don't want to do things that make people jump kind of like, oh gosh, a jump scare. And you want to create or recreate as much as possible that feeling that you're sitting across from someone in person having a conversation.
That was really interesting. So people might be listening to this. What you were doing as you were explaining those, you were moving and demonstrating
Yes,
the bad practice.
that
When you
fact.
talked about personal space, you leant forward, you were right up into the camera.
Yes, that extreme
I,
close up.
I never really thought of that as being in my personal space, but actually, as you said it, yeah, you were. That's what the
Right? It's
brain is
it's
doing
very
unconsciously, isn't it? Thinking,
jarring.
oh,
It's like, hey, and for new prospects or certain cultures, it's aggressive. It comes across as very aggressive. And what happens is a lot of times people, sellers get excited about what they're saying and they want to connect, and our inclination is to jut our heads towards the screen to try and make this point, and it can be very off-putting to some people. So it's understanding that, the other person's screen is probably about 12 to 18 inches in front of them. You're about 12 to 18 inches behind yours. That's a good level of personal or social space, right? But you start to get into, 6 inches. If you're 6 inches from yours, they're 6 inches from theirs. It's just too close, and it's also not terribly flattering for most people.
yeah, there's
That
that way. Get
extreme
your,
close up,
get
right?
your filters on. Get your filters on. um, Yeah, and I suppose then the other thing that I would associate with that is that when people are looking down at you
Oh,
or
yes.
looking up at you, and that's not very helpful
Yes.
either, is it? It's like,
That's
you're being told off like a
absolutely
little kid, or you're a bit
right.
subservient because you're looking
Right.
up at them. Yeah. Yeah.
I absolutely. I deal a lot of work with people and like, get your camera angle right because we associate one of the things we pick up, and a lot of this is what is that first impression we're making? Because so much happens during those first few moments when you meet a new customer, right? They're assessing you. They're, and just, maybe even subconsciously going, is this person somebody I want to have a conversation with? Are they competent? Are they confident? Are they prepared? And one of the things that we judge fairly quickly is status, right? And so, by looking up at your camera, it's like you give yourself a lower status, looking down, a higher status. And you want to start off on equal footing with your customer, right? And so just we don't want to subconsciously plant those obstacles in the way.
Yeah. I'm a bit obsessive with the eyeline eyeliners, but yeah, I kind of remember from FMCG days where we had talked about eyeline is byline, and you want to try and get your
Oh,
product on
yeah,
someone's eyeline because that's what they're
right.
going to get most attention. But it's if you've got the camera on your eyeline, then it's just easier to look into it, isn't it? And like you say, you're looking someone in the eye,
It
not
is if you
looking.
have your camera in the right place and you don't have one of those giant screens and you gotta have the camera on the very top, and that's so, yes, if you need to get that in the right spot, and yes, but eyeline is byline, I like that.
Yeah, no, that's an FMCG thing. That supermarkets charge
Yeah,
you to put your stuff on
right,
that level. But
right, absolutely, that's where it's
and
all happening.
I mean, that's what I do is I have an external camera and I have two screens. So I put the camera in front of the screen and look through. Can't see everything on the screen, but it's worth it because I know that you're just behind that camera. So most of the time, I should be looking at you. I'm sorry, I should
Yeah,
be looking
and
you in the eye because I'm looking at you anyway. So I am getting best of both worlds.
right, right, and
Yeah.
that is really there's a minimum level, minimum requirement for eye contact too. There's certain things that we expect, characteristics that we expect in place if we're going to develop a relationship with somebody, whether that's personal or business, right? We expect that they're trustworthy, that they're confident, that they're interested in you. And these qualities are really communicated a lot through eye contact, right? Relationships experts say that in order to even build a relationship, you need to maintain eye contact about two-thirds of the time, right? And that's based on in-person experience. I think it's higher virtually because when you're in person and somebody looks away, you know that they're still engaged. They're just looking at your desk. You have that common environment. If you look away virtually, I don't know if you got a call and you're checking that, but or you're looking at your notes but it instantly disconnects you. And so many people, I think, underestimate the power and the need for eye contact on camera, and they grossly underestimate how much eye contact they're actually making.
Yeah. This is one I'm so aware of. So I know I'm a visual thinker.
Mm.
So visual thinker up and to the sides. So when
Yeah.
I'm thinking, could I look less interested, Julie, in what you're talking about? Or sometimes, again, if I'm thinking about something I've heard and I'm forming a sentence, it's like that. Now, I'm not
Mhm.
looking at anything. It's just into space, but it's the
Right,
corporate
right.
president. I look so bored, don't I?
Well, there's a couple things going on there. I mean, first of all, it's not well, you don't want that death stare at the camera
Yeah,
either, right? That
yeah,
can be off-putting. And you want to keep some of those natural qualities because we're not going for AI 100% eye contact, right? Where they try and replace your
oh, you praise you.
uh,
Yeah, that's spooky.
eyes so that you're staring. There's nothing comfortable about that. And there's so many nuances around eye contact. I see that as a remote possibility. But what we want to do is keep, people naturally look away when they get their thought, but bringing things back to the camera. And so that's a practice skill that a lot of people have not developed is okay, when do I look at the camera? There's times where it's more important to look at the camera than others. If you think about it, When do you look at someone in person? Right? When you're
Yeah, so
being,
yeah,
when
important
you're
points. Yeah,
meeting them, when you're introducing yourself, when they're talking,
yeah,
right? When you're trying to make a point. And there's key times that are really important to make eye contact, and there's times where it's not as important. And there's times where, if you're sharing slides or demoing software, a lot of people say, well, I can't possibly share slides and demo software at the same and look at the camera. And that I've proven that wrong with a group of 500 salespeople I went through training with, who started out saying, no, there's no way I can do that. And I measured them at the beginning, and they made about 30% eye contact um, during their presentation. Then at the end of our work together, they made just over 70%, 72% eye contact while sharing slides and software. So it absolutely can be done. It's not intuitive, right? But there's a way to do it, to keep connected with your audience, because otherwise, as we were talking about earlier, you're just telling people things and they're just reading it, and it's not an engaging experience, right? That a presentation should be more of a conversation. And so it's up to you to tell them what to look at the slide and then tell them what it means, right? Give it context. That's why you're there. So what this is telling you on this slide is how this is going to help you save XYZ, instead of just, well, let the slides speak for themselves, right?
send me then.
Yeah, yeah. I think salespeople are diminishing their importance and their role in the process by doing that. Then you can be replaced by AI, right? If you're not there to add value to conversation, to connect with your buyer, what are you there for?
Yeah.
You're just delivering information.
So are we talking now minimum standards, or are we, because of the other part of the conversation I want to have with
Yeah.
you was talking about excellence. So are we sort of, we're going, well, there's an element of minimum standards here, but if you're going to start to do this, you can actually quite quickly start to move towards excellence. The area in
Right.
between, there's the no man's land doesn't really exist. It's get better and you'll be perceived a lot better. Is that kind of how it works then?
It absolutely is. I've had when salespeople go through this and they'll get on call with a buyer and they'll say, God, it was you just I loved how much I felt like you really saw me. I can't believe how much they even comment on their eye contact, which is a weird thing to comment on, but that's how rare it is. That's this opportunity for salespeople who are, looking to, go beyond and defy those expectations. But there are more people that are getting better at it. And so yes, there are new standards. And first of all, not you know, a lot of people don't make hardly any eye contact. So a minimum is, making more eye contact. The new standards are really knowing when to use that eye contact. Like I mentioned, when are those key times, using it when you are sharing and understanding how to manage that along with your tools and the videos. And if you're going to make eye contact, then you also need to understand how to read body language while making eye contact, right? When to really check in. You need to understand. Most salespeople tell me, well, I don't want to be looking at the camera that much because I need to see what's going on. Well, if you really understand virtual body language, you'll understand there's not that much going on. Have you looked at a virtual audience? It's typically, the sea of what I call resting business face. Now, if you're trying to gain some information from that, you're going to be sorely disappointed, right? Because we humans we have a different behavior when we sit in front of a screen. For a lifetime, we've been trained to sort of sit in front of a screen and fall into receiving mode, right? And we're passive, and our energy goes down. When your energy goes down, your facial expressions go down. And so we associate all this in-person meaning with virtual behavior, and it's just not true. I mean, how many times have you presented and you thought, "Oh my gosh, the audience hated this?" I'm not sure they were
Every
paying it.
day, Julie.
They looked like they were paying. They looked really uninterested. And then you'll get some feedback and go, God, that was fantastic. I loved it. And most salespeople I know have had that experience.
Yeah.
It's, and if we don't understand both how our behavior affects our audience and how our audience's on-screen behavior affects us, we're really not, we're not navigating this world as successfully as we could.
Yeah. I mean, yes, for me, it's getting people to do stuff. That's the easiest way to get some kind of reaction is to ask for it. So if it's
Right.
training, it's just pop in chat. Now, if people have just got to pop in chat, they'll tend to have to lean forward, which is a sign of interest. So you create the
Right.
interest through that, and then they do something and it comes up and we can comment on it one to one. It's a question. It's a well-timed question. If they're
Right.
feeling
Right.
it's a bit of a monologue, give them something to do, which is answer you. Yeah. So
Yes. Yes.
I try to get people to do things.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's absolutely you want to engage them, but and that's another like new level skill we need to get to is how do we get this typically very passive virtual audience? And I think most salespeople, that's one of the things they dislike the most about virtual is that no, especially if you have a group meeting, the more people, the less likely they are to engage. That inverse rule. And, getting people to talk, getting anybody to answer a question. And so because they don't understand the dynamics of a virtual audience, they panic and they rush through and they do these monologues. There are more virtual monologues than there were in-person monologues going on because we don't have those cues that somebody is about to ask a question, or it's really hard to see, or we ask a question and nobody answers, and it takes much longer for people to answer, especially in a group. So we panic, and then we answer our own question, and we keep going, which teaches our audience they don't have to participate, which is not the message you want to send. So it's a vicious cycle that we have to break by understanding what's happening on both sides of the camera with us and our audience.
Yeah, more people, less engagement. Isn't that called the Ringleman effect? I think
That's
so.
right.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, you brought that up.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, and then the other name for it, which I love, because I thought, actually, I'm going to sign up for this, is social loafing.
Yes, social
I'm
loafing,
I'm up for a
right.
bit of social loafing. So put me
Right.
down for two, yeah.
I love that term, that's awesome.
But
Yeah,
it's true, so you
there's
have to be aware of it and go, it is gonna happen, do something about it. So just figure, how can you add that little bit of interaction, give that little bit of that kind of
well,
interest
here
to
and I'll just share one tip that will help this solve the problem dramatically, and that is most people ask a question, and they'll immediately look down to their screen. It's like, "So, any thoughts on what I just shared?" And then they're going to their screen and they're looking at the images, trying to see what's happening. And everybody's just kind of got a blank face. Everybody else is looking to see if somebody else is going to answer. And nobody, if I'm not looking at the camera, nobody feels like that question is directed to them, right? They're like, oh, well, she must be talking to Bob or, I'm not in the hot seat. Well, if you simply ask that question and, what do you think of any questions on what I've shared today? And you hold it there, everybody's gonna start to feel like, "Oh gosh, she kinda wants an answer. She's looking at me," and
she's looking.
somebody is
Yeah,
going to answer. But if you don't do that and you don't also hold that pause long enough, it's gonna be a monologue, and it's gonna be painful.
yeah. Because that's if I understood well what happens there, it's because it is the subtleties of when you're in the room, you can ask a question, and even just
Yes.
a briefing piece of eye contact to somebody, they think, "Oh, you've actually mean that to me, don't you?" And they'll answer, they'll pick up on it. We're
Yep.
humans, that's what we do. And you do that on screen, except you're looking now at someone on screen, but they don't
Right.
know they're looking at
No,
you.
they don't think you're looking at them at all,
Your
right?
eyes are just doing something else. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So it's a different medium, and there are different rules, and we have to get more fluid at this so we can be present and in the moment and not thinking about, okay, now I look at the camera. Okay, now look at my slides. Now I look at there's a strategy to it that I teach. And that's what makes it just become natural,
Yeah.
right? But if you don't go through that process and you just try to do what you feel is natural, it doesn't come across as natural, and it doesn't connect you with the buyer. It doesn't seem like you're interested or listening, and that's a real problem.
Yeah. And talk to me about the hands. We've got to talk
And
about the hands. I can't let you go
the
without the
hands.
hands.
Well, what have you heard about the hands?
Oh, they shouldn't be seen anywhere at all on screen,
No.
should they? Stop
Oh my
distracting
gosh.
people with your movement. Yeah, rock solid in the
Yeah,
foot. Yeah, okay,
like
I'm being facetious, aren't I? But
yeah, yeah. It's
but that is advice that a lot of people hear, isn't it? Yeah,
it's I don't know who started that, but it's certainly not anyone that worked on camera.
but anyone
Uh,
that we like.
there it's was probably given to people that use too much hands, too much fast. Certainly there are different ways to use your hands. But what happens is when you tell people who normally use their hands when they speak to not use their hands, all that energy goes into don't use your hands. Don't use your hands. No, 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 we got to put your hands out. And it's the most wooden, flat presentation you've ever seen. It just takes all that energy away because they're trying not to do something. You can use your hands. And actually, there's a study that shows, there's a lot of nonverbal cues that help build trust or convey confidence. And one of the things that helps build trust is being able to see someone's hands.
Mm.
And it kind of goes back to the caveman days. Like, if you can see my hands, I don't have a stick behind you that I'm going to beat you with. So and it also makes you look, it gives you more authenticity and can kind of they see more of the full picture of you. And they can add, your hands can underscore what you're saying. If, they should support what you're saying, they should add emphasis. They can bring to light an idea like we went from here to here. There's lots of ways to use hands that are helpful and supportive to what you're saying, as opposed to, we're just nervously flailing around, which conveys a whole different message. So,
And
learning what video friendly gestures are, which is, trying to stay within this frame, which takes developing that muscle memory, understanding, again, it's that how, a lot of people gesture very close to the screen, which is, if you could see this, you see how distracting that is. It makes my hand look huge. And it's something
yeah,
like, what is she doing? Is she, we don't want the gesture itself to draw attention to itself, but it should really support what you're saying, right? And bring life and energy to it.
and if you're
So,
serious about presentation skills, so let's
mhm.
forget virtual for a minute. You would practice this stuff. You'd think, okay, when I'm making this
Right.
point, this slide is going to come up, and I'm going to do something with my body, with my hand, with whatever to make the point because that's what works. Okay, so now I'm working within this little box. I can still do that because I'm talking about going from here to here and the steps that you will make to get there. And you can
Yes.
practice doing that stuff in this, okay, it's confined, but this stage
Right.
that you've got to do it. And those are things, again, I think you can go from minimum standards, I'm doing it with my hands, aren't I? To excellence quite
Right.
quickly, just with a bit of thought and a bit of practice about what you're actually trying to say. And look, maybe I've worked a lot with non-native English speaking audiences, so I've had to use my hands a lot
Mm.
in the past, so it becomes quite normal, and I just realized that, okay, I'm doing some of my hands now, you can't see it. Bring it up, Fred. But just don't go
Yes,
in front of your
yes.
face. Yeah?
And what happens a lot is people think, "Well, I'm not gonna use my hands, or I'm not gonna show them," but they're kind of bouncing along here on the bottom of the screen, and all that does is make me go, "What is she doing?" Right? "What is she typing?"
Knitting.
It's so they can be a complete distraction if you're not thinking about it at all. You have to at least think, if I'm using them, try and use them in the frame, purposefully, slow, specific, and otherwise they're down, right? We don't want to be in this range where they're at the bottom of the screen or, constantly flailing out around.
Well, what is just at the bottom kind of, yeah, you look like you're knitting or typing. Because, God,
Yeah, it's
you're
just
really that uninterested? You're just such a standard presentation. You're talking through, and you
right,
always
right.
say,
I'm
but you're actually sending
doing
an email to somebody else anyway.
right. I'm
Multitask,
multitasking.
yeah.
Right,
That's
I'm
not clever. That's
multitasking.
impressive,
Well,
but
if you
not
think about it, the word presentation, the core word is present, right? So we want to be present. And what I work with people on is yes, these skills, like someone say, well, yeah, I can do that. But we're thinking about a million things when we're presenting. So if you don't devote enough time and get feedback on what you're doing and how it's perceived by your audience, oftentimes they just sort of fly out the window when you get busy. And what we want to do is spend, enough time just devoted to getting these skills to the point where they're all muscle memory. And then you can be present in your presentations and your demos and not have to worry, am I doing this right? Should I be, do they feel like I'm talking to them? Am I doing something distracting? So it's a new skill set. And I think we have to give it its due. And again, a percentage of people are, raising the bar, and those who are staying behind, that gap it's gonna be very noticeable. And if you're in a competitive industry where there's very few, places to really gain a competitive edge, this is a big one. We're still in that stage where this can be, mastering these skills can be a huge advantage because your customer feels like, gosh, I can trust this person. I feel, they make me feel confident about, the solution. And, I want to, and I'm curious. They're interesting. They're interested in me. And those are all emotional qualities that I think we dismiss too easily in sales that play an actually bigger role than maybe some people realize.
no, I think they do, and a lot of it's unconscious stuff. You don't sit and think, "I think Julie was really good and authentic because she used her hands excellently and she
Right.
maintained eye contact." It was just, "That was a good call, like her."
Exactly. Like it's just
Don't even think
which
about it
is
anymore.
better than I don't know why, but that person like I just didn't feel like they were confident because they were moving around a lot and they were never really made eye contact with me and they sounded like they were reading from a slide. All those things. We make those decisions pretty quickly, and so if you continue them throughout the presentation, you just reinforce that. And even if you try and turn that around mid presentation, it's hard to overcome those initial thoughts and beliefs that people form right away.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it ain't going away, is it? We are gonna continue using this as a way of working, probably more and more, because people are liking it more and more. Even people I've spoken to a lot of people who say, "I'm actually quite surprised I'm saying this, but I prefer virtual meetings now because they're just so much more effective. We can get tons more done."
Right, right.
So I think it's worth investing time and effort. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there'll be more tools, there'll be more technology, but there's the whole, what you bring to it. The technology can improve, some of these nuances that make you come across as credible and confident and empathetic. Um, they're not gonna change that. So these are things that are in your control, and they're difference makers for sure.
I think so. So how can people get in touch with you? Because you are talking about this stuff all the time. I mean, I
I
expect you're gonna say
I,
LinkedIn. And you put tons of stuff out on this. There's a decent
there's a
lesson
lot to
every
say,
week.
Fred.
There is. Yeah, we've already had half an hour. I
There
mean,
is.
tons. Yeah, a whole
Yeah,
book's
and
worth.
yeah, exactly. Got a whole book's worth. Yeah, if I wrote that today, it'd be twice as long. And I'm always learning when I'm working with teams. It's like they tell me, "Oh, this is really I don't know how to do this," or "This is really uncomfortable." And so, working on new challenges. So, yes, I'm on LinkedIn, Julie Hansen Sales Training. Very active on there. So connect with me there, or you can go to my website, juliehansen.live, where I've got a lot of blogs and videos, and you can go there. I've also got a free cheat sheet that you can download, and maybe you can put the link to that in the show notes, Fred.
Will do.
Okay, so it's
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
9 things to remember when you're on camera, just to really elevate your presence and your communications.
Awesome. We will drop all of those links into the show notes. so people can get those dead easy.